The morning sun cast long shadows across the Fort Bragg training facility as Commander Jake Morrison stepped out of his black SUV. The crisp North Carolina air filled his lungs as he adjusted his tactical vest and checked his watch. Today was evaluation day for the new sniper candidates, and Morrison had seen enough wannabe marksmen to know that most would wash out before lunch. Morrison had spent 12 years with SEAL Team 6, with 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq under his belt. His reputation as both a sniper and instructor was legendary within special operations circles. The scar running from his left temple to his jawline served as a permanent reminder of a Taliban sniper who had gotten too close for comfort in Helmand Province. That experience had taught him that respect was earned through proven skill, not given freely. The training facility buzzed with activity as 23 candidates prepared for their final assessment. Morrison walked through the crowd, his experienced eyes cataloging each person. Most were military personnel from various branches, their uniforms crisp and their attitudes confident. A few civilians with law enforcement backgrounds rounded out the group. Then, he spotted something that made him pause. Near the equipment table stood a woman, maybe 5 feet 6 inches tall, with brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore standard BDUs that seemed slightly too large for her frame. What caught Morrison's attention wasn't her appearance, but her behavior. While the other candidates clustered together, sharing war stories and boasting about their shooting records, she stood alone, methodically checking her gear with the quiet precision of someone who had done this thousands of times. Morrison approached the group and raised his voice to address all candidates. Listen up. I'm Commander Morrison, and for the next 5 days, I'll be evaluating your performance as potential precision marksmen. Some of you think you're hot shots because you qualified expert on your basic rifle course. Let me be clear, what you did in basic training was playing with toys. This is where we separate the real shooters from the pretenders. A muscular Army Ranger named Peterson laughed and nudged his buddy. Easy day, sir. I've been shooting since I could walk. My grandfather taught me on his farm in Texas, and I've never missed a target that mattered. Several other candidates nodded in agreement, their confidence evident. Morrison had seen this attitude before. Overconfidence killed more missions than enemy fire ever did. Is that so? Morrison's voice carried a hint of amusement. Well, Peterson, since you're so confident, you can go first on the qualification course. But before we start, let me explain what real precision shooting involves. Morrison walked to a whiteboard and began sketching a diagram. Precision shooting isn't about bragging rights or showing off. It's about mathematics, physics, and mental discipline. When you're lying in a hide site for 18 hours waiting for a target, your comfort doesn't matter. When the wind is gusting at 15 knots and you have one shot to save your team, your confidence means nothing. All that matters is your ability to put the round exactly where it needs to go. He turned back to the group. The human factor is the biggest variable in any shooting equation. Your heartbeat, your breathing, your mental state. Even what you ate for breakfast can affect your shot. The best snipers learn to control these variables or compensate for them. Morrison noticed the quiet woman nodding slightly as he spoke, her eyes focused and attentive. She understood what he was talking about. The course today consists of multiple stages. Morrison continued. You'll start with known distance targets from 100 to 800 meters. Then, we move to unknown distance estimation and engagement. After that, we test your ability to adjust for wind and environmental factors. Finally, you'll face moving targets and time pressure scenarios. He pointed to the rifle rack containing 23 identical weapons. You'll all be using the same rifle system, Remington 700 and .308 Winchester with identical scopes. No excuses about equipment differences. Your skill is the only variable that matters. Peterson stepped forward with a grin. Sir, what's the qualifying score? 80% accuracy across all stages, Morrison replied. Miss more than 1 in 5 shots, and you're done. But accuracy isn't everything. I'll also be evaluating your shooting position, target engagement sequence, and ability to work under pressure. As the candidates moved toward the firing line, Morrison overheard Peterson talking to his friends. This is going to be a joke. I scored expert on every qualification since boot camp. Watch me show this Navy boy how the Army shoots. The quiet woman walked past them, carrying her rifle with practiced ease. She found a spot at the far end of the firing line, away from the chatter and posturing. Morrison found himself curious about her background. Her name tape read Chun, but her file had been surprisingly thin when he reviewed it the night before. Candidates, you have 30 minutes to zero your rifles at the 100-meter line, Morrison announced. Use as many rounds as you need to get your scope properly adjusted. This is your only chance to familiarize yourself with your weapon system. Peterson and several others began firing immediately, making bold adjustments to their scopes after each shot. The sound of gunfire filled the air as most candidates worked through their zeroing process with varying degrees of success. Chen took a different approach. She spent the first 5 minutes examining her rifle, checking the scope mounts, and testing the bolt action. Only then did she assume a shooting position. Her first shot hit 2 inches high and 1 inch left of center. Instead of immediately adjusting her scope, she fired 2 more shots, creating a tight 3-shot group. Morrison watched with growing interest as Chun made a single, precise adjustment to her scope and fired another 3-shot group. This one centered perfectly on the target. She had zeroed her rifle with only 6 rounds while others were still struggling after 20 or more shots. Time's up, Morrison called. We're moving to the 200-meter line for the first stage of qualification. As the group moved to new positions, Morrison approached Chun. Where did you learn to zero a rifle like that? Practice, sir, she replied simply. What's your background, Chun? Your file doesn't have much detail. National Guard, sir. Weekend warrior from Oregon. Morrison studied her face, looking for tells or signs of deception. Something didn't add up. National Guard units rarely produce shooters with that level of precision, especially in their zeroing technique. What's your day job? I work for the Forest Service, sir. Peterson laughed from nearby. Forest Service? What do you do, count trees? This ought to be entertaining. Chen didn't react to the comment, instead focusing on preparing her shooting position for the next stage. Morrison noticed how she constructed her position, textbook perfect, with natural bone support and minimal muscle tension. Whoever had trained her knew what they were doing. First stage begins now, Morrison announced. You have 20 shots to engage targets at 200, 300, 400, and 500 meters. 5 shots per distance. You have 30 minutes total. The targets are military silhouettes with clearly marked scoring zones. Only hits in the vital zone count. Peterson took his position with confidence, his shooting stance aggressive and muscular. His first shot at 200 meters hit low, prompting him to immediately adjust his point of aim. His shooting rhythm was fast and loud, each shot accompanied by unnecessary movement and position shifting. Other candidates followed similar patterns, quick shots, frequent position adjustments, and visible frustration when shots didn't go where expected. The sound of brass hitting concrete mixed with occasional curses as shooters struggled with the longer distances. Chen's approach was completely different. She settled into her position with deliberate slowness, her breathing deep and controlled. Her first shot broke cleanly with no visible movement of the rifle. Through his spotting scope, Morrison watched the bullet impact dead center in the target's vital zone. Her shooting rhythm was methodical and consistent. Each shot followed the same precise sequence: sight alignment, breathing control, natural respiratory pause, trigger press, and follow-through. No wasted movement, no rushing, no visible signs of stress or excitement. By the time the 30-minute limit expired, the results were clear. Peterson had managed 14 hits out of 20 shots, a respectable but unexceptional performance. Most other candidates scored between 12 and 16 hits, well within the expected range for experienced military personnel. Chun had achieved something Morrison hadn't seen in years of conducting these evaluations. 20 shots fired, 20 hits scored. Every single bullet had found the vital zone, with most clustering in the center ring that marked perfect shots. Cease fire, Morrison called. Safe your weapons and move back from the firing line. As the candidates collected their brass and prepared for the next stage, Peterson approached Chun with a puzzled expression. How did you do that? I mean, you made it look easy. It's just practice, Chun replied, her voice steady and matter-of-fact. Practice? Peterson shook his head. I've been practicing my whole life. There's got to be more to it than that. Morrison found himself wondering the same thing. Chun's performance hadn't just been good. It had been exceptional by any standard. The consistency of her shot placement, the calmness of her demeanor, and the efficiency of her technique all pointed to someone with far more training than a weekend National Guard soldier should possess. Next stage is unknown distance, Morrison announced. You'll have targets placed at random distances between 300 and 600 meters. No range cards, no spotting rounds. You must estimate the distance, calculate your holdover or scope adjustment, and engage each target with one shot only. Miss, and you're done for the day. The candidates moved to a different range where targets had been placed at various distances across a valley. Some targets were barely visible, others stood out clearly against the backdrop. The challenge was determining which was which and making the correct adjustments for each engagement. Morrison pulled out his rangefinder and confirmed the target distances: 320 meters, 445 meters, 523 meters, 580 meters, and 615 meters. Each candidate would engage all 5 targets in sequence, with no opportunity for correction or second chances. Peterson, you're up first, Morrison said. Peterson studied the targets through his rifle scope, taking several minutes to make his distance estimations. His first shot at what he judged to be the closest target missed completely. Morrison called out the miss, and Peterson's shoulders sagged with disappointment. You're done, Peterson. Step back from the line. One by one, candidates attempted the unknown distance challenge. Most failed on their second or third shot as the difficulty of accurate range estimation became apparent. A few Army snipers and Marine marksmen managed to hit 3 or 4 targets before missing, respectable performances that earned Morrison's approval. When Chin's turn came, she approached the firing line with the same calm demeanor she had displayed all morning. She spent less time studying the targets than most candidates, instead focusing on environmental factors, wind direction, light conditions, and atmospheric clarity. Her first shot broke cleanly, and Morrison's spotting scope confirmed a center hit on the 320-meter target. Her second shot engaged the 445-meter target with equal precision. The third, fourth, and fifth shots followed in steady succession, each finding its mark with mechanical reliability. 5 targets, 5 shots, 5 hits. Morrison lowered his spotting scope and stared at Chun. In 15 years of conducting sniper evaluations, he had never seen anyone clear the unknown distance stage with perfect accuracy on their first attempt. Even experienced military snipers typically needed multiple tries to achieve that level of performance. Outstanding shooting, Chun, Morrison said, his professional demeanor hiding his amazement. Thank you, sir. The remaining candidates completed their attempts with varying degrees of success, but Morrison's attention kept returning to Chin's performance. Everything about her technique suggested training far beyond what any National Guard unit could provide. Her range estimation had been flawless, her ballistic calculations precise, and her execution perfect. As the morning session concluded, Morrison gathered the surviving candidates together. Of the original 23, only 14 remained in the evaluation after the unknown distance challenge. Peterson and several other confident shooters had been eliminated, their egos deflated by the harsh reality of precision marksmanship. We'll break for lunch and continue with environmental shooting this afternoon, Morrison announced. Wind reading and long-range engagement. If you think this morning was challenging, you haven't seen anything yet. As the candidates dispersed toward the mess hall, Morrison approached Chun one more time. Chun, can I have a word with you? She stopped and turned to face him, her expression neutral and professional. Your shooting today has been exceptional, Morrison said. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've rarely seen anyone perform at your level. Are you sure you're telling me everything about your background? Chun met his eyes directly. I've told you the truth, sir. I'm National Guard, and I work for the Forest Service. The Forest Service doesn't typically produce shooters of your caliber. Some jobs require different skills than others, sir. Morrison studied her face, looking for any hint of deception or hidden agenda. What he saw was complete honesty, mixed with something else, a quiet confidence that came only from extensive experience under pressure. What kind of work do you do for the Forest Service? Wildlife management, sir. The answer was technically accurate, but clearly incomplete. Morrison had spent enough time interrogating enemy prisoners to recognize when someone was telling the truth while withholding important details. "We'll continue this conversation later," Morrison said. "Right now, I'm more interested in seeing how you handle the afternoon challenges." As Chin walked toward the mess hall, Morrison pulled out his phone and dialed a number from memory. "This is Morrison. I need you to run a more detailed background check on one of my candidates. Name is Chun, first name not specified in my roster. National Guard, Oregon. Claims to work for the Forest Service." He paused, watching Chun disappear into the building. "And when you run that check, dig deeper than the standard file. Something doesn't add up here." Morrison had learned to trust his instincts over the years, and right now they were telling him that Chun was much more than she appeared to be. The question was whether that was a good thing or a potential problem. The afternoon would provide more answers, but Morrison suspected that Chin's most impressive demonstrations were still to come. The afternoon heat was building as the 14 remaining candidates returned to the range after lunch. Morrison had used the break to set up a more challenging course of fire that would test their ability to read environmental conditions and engage targets under realistic field conditions. He had also made several phone calls about Chun, though the answers he received had only deepened his curiosity. "This afternoon, we're focusing on environmental factors," Morrison announced to the assembled group. "Wind reading, temperature effects, and atmospheric conditions. These variables can turn a perfect shot into a complete miss if you don't account for them properly." He pointed toward a series of flags and wind indicators placed at various distances downrange. "The wind is currently gusting between 8 and 15 knots from the southwest, but it's not consistent across the range. You'll need to read the conditions at each target location and adjust accordingly." Morrison had deliberately chosen a day with challenging weather conditions. The wind was variable and unpredictable, exactly the kind of environment where theoretical knowledge separated from practical experience. Many shooters who looked good on calm days fell apart when Mother Nature added her own complications to the equation. "Each of you will engage 5 targets at distances from 400 to 800 meters, Morrison continued. "The targets are steel plates, so you'll hear your hits immediately. You get one sighting shot at the 400-meter target to confirm your zero. Then, for record shots, add increasing distances. The 800-meter target is life-size, but at that distance, precision becomes critical." Master Sergeant Rodriguez, an Army sniper instructor with 2 combat deployments, stepped forward. "Sir, are we shooting from supported positions or field positions?" "Field positions," Morrison replied. "No shooting rests, no sandbags. You'll construct your own positions using available materials or shoot from natural support. This is about real-world application, not bench rest accuracy." Chen had found a spot under a small tree that provided some wind protection. Morrison watched as she gathered several rocks and constructed a stable shooting position with natural materials. Her technique was methodical and efficient, creating a solid platform without unnecessary complexity. Other candidates struggled more with position construction. Some tried to build elaborate shooting rests that collapsed under the rifle's weight. Others chose positions that looked comfortable but provided poor stability for long-range shooting. "Rodriguez, you're up first," Morrison called. Rodriguez was a capable shooter with solid fundamentals. His sighting shot at 400 meters hit slightly left of center, which he correctly attributed to wind drift. His first record shot at 500 meters rang the steel plate with authority, followed by another solid hit at 600 meters. At 700 meters, the wind conditions became more challenging. Rodriguez took his time reading the environmental conditions, studying the grass movement, and flag positions at various points downrange. His shot missed the target by inches, the bullet drifting further than his wind calculation had predicted. "Good shooting, Rodriguez," Morrison said. "Wind reading is more art than science sometimes." Rodriguez completed his string with 3 hits out of 4 record shots, a respectable performance under the challenging conditions. Other candidates followed with similar results, most managing 2 or 3 hits as the distances increased and wind effects became more pronounced. When Chin's turn arrived, Morrison paid particular attention to her preparation routine. She spent considerable time studying the environmental indicators, but her approach was different from the other shooters. Instead of focusing solely on the flags and obvious wind signs, she watched subtle indicators, dust movement, heat mirage patterns, and vegetation response to air currents. Her sighting shot at 400 meters hit dead center on the steel plate. The metallic ring echoed across the range, confirming perfect placement despite the swirling wind conditions. First record shot, 500 meters, Morrison announced. Chen settled into her shooting position with the same deliberate precision she had displayed all day. Her breathing pattern remained steady and controlled as she aligned her crosshairs on the distant target. The shot broke cleanly, and the immediate ring of steel confirmed another perfect hit. At 600 meters, the wind had picked up noticeably. Morrison watched Chen's wind reading process through his binoculars. She wasn't just looking at the indicators. She was building a mental map of wind conditions across the entire range, identifying areas where the terrain channeled or disrupted airflow. Her second record shot rang steel again, the bullet finding its mark despite wind conditions that had caused several previous shooters to miss completely. 700 meters, Morrison called. This was where most candidates began to struggle significantly. The combination of distance and environmental factors created a complex ballistic problem that challenged even experienced marksmen. The target appeared small through the rifle scope, and wind drift could easily push a bullet completely off the steel plate. Chen's preparation for this shot was noticeably longer than her previous engagements. She studied the wind indicators multiple times, made minor adjustments to her shooting position, and checked her scope settings carefully. When she finally settled behind her rifle, Morrison could see the intense concentration in her posture. The shot rang out, and, after a brief delay, the distinctive sound of bullets striking steel echoed back from the 700-meter target. Another perfect hit. Morrison found himself shaking his head in amazement. Chen wasn't just hitting these targets. She was hitting them with consistency that suggested capabilities far beyond her stated background. Final shot, 800 meters, Morrison announced. At 800 meters, the target represented a significant challenge even for experienced military snipers. The steel plate was life-sized but appeared tiny through the rifle scope. Wind drift effects were magnified at the extended range, and even small errors in range estimation or environmental reading could result in complete misses. Chen's preparation routine became even more methodical. She spent several minutes studying the entire range, identifying wind patterns, and calculating the complex ballistic solution required for the shot. Morrison noticed that she made a small adjustment to her scope elevation, suggesting she had calculated a precise firing solution rather than relying on general range cards. When she finally settled into her final shooting position, the range fell silent except for the wind rustling through nearby trees. Even the other candidates had stopped their conversations to watch this final shot. Chen's breathing pattern slowed to the controlled rhythm Morrison recognized from his own combat deployments. The shot broke with perfect surprise, the rifle recoiling straight back without any indication of poor trigger control or position instability. The bullet's flight time to 800 meters was noticeable, a brief moment of suspension before the metallic ring of a perfect hit echoed across the range. 4 record shots, for perfect hits, under some of the most challenging environmental conditions Morrison had seen during a sniper evaluation. The other candidates stared in silent amazement. Rodriguez approached Morrison with a puzzled expression. "Sir, I've been doing this for 12 years, and I've never seen shooting like that. Who is she really?" Morrison was wondering the same thing. Chen's performance had moved beyond impressive into the realm of extraordinary. Her wind reading skills were at least equal to his own, and her shooting precision was consistently better than most special operations snipers he had worked with. "Chun, front and center," Morrison called. She approached with the same calm demeanor she had maintained throughout the day, showing no signs of stress or excitement despite her flawless performance. "Outstanding shooting today," Morrison said. "Your performance has been exceptional by any standard. I'm curious about your training background. Where did you learn to read wind conditions like that?" "Experience, sir," Chen replied simply. "What kind of experience?" "National Guard training doesn't typically cover environmental factors in that level of detail. My job requires accurate shooting under various conditions, sir." Morrison sensed he was getting the same type of carefully truthful but incomplete answers he had received all day. "What exactly do you do for the Forest Service that requires that level of marksmanship skill?" "Predator control, sir." The answer stopped Morrison cold. Predator control work could indeed require exceptional marksmanship skills, but the level of precision Chun had demonstrated suggested something far more specialized than typical wildlife management. What kind of predators? Morrison asked. Primarily wolves and mountain lions that threaten livestock or pose dangers to public safety. Occasionally bears in problem situations. Morrison had worked with a few civilian hunters and wildlife professionals over the years, and he knew that predator control work could be extremely challenging. Shooting a moving wolf at long range in difficult terrain required skills that many military snipers would find challenging. But Chen's capabilities suggested training that went beyond even specialized civilian work. How long have you been doing predator control work? 8 years, sir. Rodriguez stepped closer to the conversation. Ma'am, what's the longest shot you've made on a predator? Chen paused for a moment, as if calculating whether to answer the question. Approximately 1,200 meters on a wolf pack leader that was coordinating attacks on a cattle ranch. Morrison felt his jaw drop slightly. A 1,200-meter shot on a live target in field conditions was extraordinary by any standard. Most military snipers never attempted shots beyond 800 meters in combat, and those who did were considered among the elite of their profession. 1,200 meters? Morrison repeated. That's nearly 3/4 of a mile. Yes, sir. The terrain provided a clear line of sight across a valley, and environmental conditions were favorable. How many shots did it take? 1 shot, 1 kill, sir. The clinical precision of her answer sent a chill down Morrison's spine. Chen wasn't just an exceptional marksman. She was someone who had consistently performed under pressure in real-world scenarios where missing meant continued danger to innocent people. Morrison's phone buzzed with an incoming text message. The background check results he had requested earlier were finally coming through. He glanced at the message and felt his understanding of the situation shift dramatically. The text contained a single line of information that changed everything. Chun, Sarah. Former Army Special Operations. Multiple combat deployments. Classified discharge circumstances. Current NOC assignment. NOC meant non-official cover. Chen wasn't just a National Guard weekend warrior working for the Forest Service. She was an active intelligence operative using her civilian job as cover for other activities. Morrison suddenly understood why her file had been so thin and why her capabilities were so far beyond her stated background. Chun, I think we need to have a private conversation, Morrison said quietly. She nodded slightly, recognizing that her cover had been at least partially compromised. Morrison turned to address the other candidates. That concludes today's environmental shooting evaluation. Report back here tomorrow morning at 0800 for moving target engagement and stress fire exercises. Dismissed. As the candidates gathered their equipment and headed back to their quarters, Morrison led Chun to a small office building adjacent to the range. Once inside, he closed the door and activated a white noise generator, standard procedure for sensitive conversations in military facilities. So, Morrison said, settling into a chair across from Chun. Army Special Operations. How many deployments? 4 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, sir. Unit. 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, sir. Morrison's respect for Chen's capabilities immediately shifted into an entirely different category. Delta Force was the Army's premier special operations unit, equivalent to SEAL Team 6 in selection standards and mission capabilities. Getting selected for Delta was extremely difficult. Completing multiple combat deployments with the unit was proof of exceptional ability under the most demanding circumstances. What was your specialty within Delta? Precision marksman and reconnaissance, sir. And now you're working NOC for which agency? Chen hesitated for a moment before answering. I can't discuss current operational assignments, sir. Morrison nodded, understanding the limitations she faced. Non-official cover operatives couldn't reveal details about their missions without compromising ongoing operations and intelligence sources. Is your participation in this evaluation part of an active mission? No, sir. I'm here on my own initiative. I wanted to test my skills against current military standards and possibly pursue opportunities for occasional contract work. Morrison studied Chen's face, looking for signs of deception. What he saw was the same honesty he had observed all day, combined with the careful precision of someone trained in operational security. Your shooting today was beyond anything I've seen in a standard evaluation. Even by Delta Force standards, your performance was exceptional. Thank you, sir. I'm curious about something. You've been deliberately downplaying your capabilities all day. Why not just be upfront about your background? Chen considered the question carefully before answering. In my current line of work, blending in and appearing unremarkable is often more valuable than demonstrating exceptional abilities. I wanted to see how I performed when people had no expectations. Morrison understood the logic. Intelligence operatives needed to be capable of extraordinary performance while appearing completely ordinary in daily life. Chen had demonstrated both abilities perfectly. Well, you've certainly succeeded in surprising everyone today, Morrison said. The question now is what happens next. Sir, tomorrow's evaluations include moving targets and stress fire scenarios. Based on your performance today, I suspect you're going to continue impressing people. That might compromise your ability to maintain a low profile. Chen nodded thoughtfully. I understand the concern, sir. How would you recommend I handle tomorrow's exercises? Morrison considered the question carefully. Chen's cover story was holding up reasonably well. A skilled civilian marksman working in predator control wasn't entirely implausible, even if her capabilities seemed unusually advanced. But tomorrow's exercises would test abilities that were much more clearly military in nature. Here's what I'm thinking, Morrison said. You can continue with the evaluation, but you might want to dial back your performance slightly. Show that you're very good, but not so exceptional that people start asking the kind of questions that could compromise your current assignment. That makes sense, sir. On the other hand, Morrison continued, if you're seriously interested in contract work, demonstrating your full capabilities might be worthwhile. I have contacts who are always looking for qualified personnel for specialized assignments. Chen's interest was clearly piqued. What kind of specialized assignments? The kind that requires someone with your particular skill set and background. High-value target elimination, precision overwatch, maritime interdiction operations. The work pays extremely well and offers opportunities to use your abilities at the highest level. Morrison could see Chen weighing the possibilities. Contract work offered independence and financial rewards that government service rarely matched, but it also meant giving up the security and structure of official assignments. Can I think about it overnight, sir? Of course. But remember, tomorrow's exercises will essentially make that decision for you. If you perform at the level you demonstrated today, word will spread quickly through the special operations community. That might compromise your current assignment, but open doors to other opportunities. As they concluded their conversation, Morrison found himself genuinely impressed by Chen's professionalism and capabilities. She had handled the exposure of her background with the same calm competence she had demonstrated all day. Walking back toward the barracks, Morrison reflected on the day's events. In 15 years of conducting sniper evaluations, he had never encountered anyone quite like Chen. Her technical skills were extraordinary, but her ability to maintain operational security while demonstrating those skills was equally impressive. Tomorrow would reveal whether Chen chose to continue hiding her true capabilities or finally show the other candidates what a real professional looked like under pressure. The third morning arrived with overcast skies and a steady breeze that carried the scent of rain. Morrison stood in the equipment shed, finalizing preparations for what he considered the most revealing portion of the sniper evaluation. Today's exercises would test abilities that couldn't be faked or compensated for through pure marksmanship skill alone. 13 candidates remained from the original 23. Peterson and several other confident shooters had been eliminated during yesterday's environmental challenges, their assumptions about their own abilities shattered by the harsh reality of precision shooting under realistic conditions. Morrison had spent considerable time the previous evening thinking about Chen and the implications of her true background. Her Delta Force experience explained her exceptional capabilities, but it also raised questions about her current assignment and objectives. More importantly, today's exercises would make it nearly impossible for her to continue concealing her special operations training. Good morning, Morrison announced as the candidates assembled in the briefing room. Today we're moving beyond static target engagement to scenarios that more closely simulate real-world operational requirements. He clicked a remote control, and a projector displayed a series of photographs showing various tactical situations. Modern precision marksmen operate in complex environments where targets may be moving, partially concealed, or mixed with non-combatants. Your ability to make split-second decisions under pressure is as important as your shooting accuracy. Morrison advanced to the next slide, which showed a detailed range layout with multiple target systems. This morning's exercise involves moving targets at various speeds and distances. Some targets are valid threats. Others represent non-combatants that must not be engaged. You'll have limited time to identify, assess, and engage appropriate targets while avoiding mistakes that could have serious consequences. Master Sergeant Rodriguez raised his hand. Sir, what's the scoring criteria for target identification? Engaging a valid target scores positive points based on accuracy and speed, Morrison replied. Missing a valid target scores 0 points. Engaging a non-combatant target results in immediate elimination from the program. The room fell silent as candidates absorbed the implications. This wasn't just about shooting accuracy anymore. It required the kind of judgment and decision-making that typically came only from extensive operational experience. Morrison noticed Chin's expression remained completely neutral, showing no signs of concern or anxiety about the increased complexity. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with several other candidates who were clearly struggling with the psychological pressure. After moving targets, we'll conduct stress-fire exercises, Morrison continued. You'll engage multiple targets while dealing with physical and mental stressors designed to simulate combat conditions. Finally, we'll conclude with team coordination scenarios where you'll work with a spotter to engage targets beyond individual capability ranges. Sergeant Williams, a Marine sniper with 2 combat deployments, spoke up. Sir, are we engaging these targets in sequence or simultaneously? Both, Morrison replied. Some scenarios require rapid sequential engagement of multiple targets. Others involve simultaneous target appearance where you must prioritize threats and engage them in appropriate order. Morrison could see several candidates beginning to look uncomfortable. The complexity of the exercises was moving well beyond standard military training into territory typically reserved for special operations units. Equipment check in 10 minutes, Morrison announced. We'll start with individual moving target scenarios and build complexity throughout the day. As candidates prepared their gear, Morrison approached Chin privately. How are you planning to handle today's exercises? I'll perform to the best of my abilities, sir. That's what I'm concerned about, Morrison said quietly. Today's scenarios are specifically designed to reveal special operations training. If you perform at your actual capability level, your cover story won't survive the scrutiny. Chin considered his warning carefully. What would you recommend, sir? That depends on your priorities. If maintaining your current assignment is critical, you might want to consider withdrawing from the evaluation. If you're serious about contract opportunities, today could be your audition for some very interesting work. Morrison could see Chin weighing the options. Her NOC assignment presumably involved important intelligence work that could be compromised by exposure. On the other hand, the contract opportunities he had mentioned could offer significant financial and professional rewards. I appreciate the advice, sir. I'll make my decision based on how the scenarios develop. Morrison nodded, understanding her need to assess the situation as it unfolded rather than committing to a specific course of action in advance. The first moving target scenario was designed to test basic tracking and engagement skills. Targets moved at walking speed across open ground at distances from 200 to 400 meters. Each candidate had 60 seconds to engage 5 targets in sequence, with points awarded for accuracy and speed. Rodriguez went first, demonstrating solid fundamentals as he tracked and engaged the moving targets. His shooting was competent but deliberate, taking time to ensure accurate shot placement rather than rushing through the sequence. He managed 4 hits out of 5 targets within the time limit, a respectable performance. Other candidates followed with varying degrees of success. Some struggled with the mechanics of tracking moving targets, their shots consistently lagging behind the target motion. Others managed good tracking but missed due to poor trigger control or position instability. When Chin's turn arrived, Morrison watched her pre-shot routine with particular interest. She spent minimal time studying the target course, instead focusing on equipment checks and position preparation. Her confidence in handling moving target scenarios was evident in her relaxed demeanor. The first target appeared, moving from left to right at approximately 3 miles per hour. Chin's rifle tracked smoothly with the target motion, her shooting position stable and controlled. The shot broke cleanly, and the target immediately dropped, indicating a perfect center hit. The second target moved faster and at a different angle, but Chin's tracking remained flawless. Her shooting rhythm adapted seamlessly to the increased target speed, maintaining the same smooth tracking motion and clean shot execution. Morrison found himself analyzing Chin's technique with growing appreciation for her skill level. Her target tracking wasn't just accurate, it was effortless in a way that suggested thousands of hours of practice under realistic conditions. Targets 3, 4, and 5 fell in rapid succession, each shot perfectly timed and placed. Chin completed the entire sequence in 42 seconds with 5 perfect hits, a performance that exceeded anything Morrison had seen from conventional military snipers. Several candidates stared in obvious amazement. Rodriguez approached Morrison with a concerned expression. "Sir, that wasn't normal shooting. That was special operations level performance." Morrison had been expecting this moment. Chin's capabilities were now clearly beyond what any civilian or conventional military background could explain. Her cover story was essentially blown among anyone with sufficient experience to recognize advanced special operations skills. "Chun, front, and center," Morrison called. As Chin approached, Morrison could see her calculating the implications of her performance. She had essentially been forced to choose between maintaining her cover and demonstrating her true capabilities, and the demands of the scenario had made that choice for her. "Exceptional shooting," Morrison said. "Your technique suggests training that goes well beyond standard military programs." "Thank you, sir. I think it's time for complete honesty about your background. The other candidates are asking questions that your current cover story can't answer." Chin glanced around at the other candidates, most of whom were clearly confused by her performance level. "What would you like to know, sir?" "Let's start with your actual military service record." Chin paused for a moment, then seemed to reach a decision about how much information to reveal. "I served 8 years active duty, including 4 years with 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. I separated from active duty 3 years ago and currently work in a civilian capacity that occasionally requires specialized skills." Rodriguez's jaw dropped slightly. "Delta Force? That explains everything. Ma'am, what was your specialty within the unit?" "Precision engagement and reconnaissance," Chin replied simply. Morrison could see the dynamics among the candidates shifting as they absorbed this information. Chin was no longer just another evaluation candidate. She was someone with credentials that commanded immediate respect within the special operations community. "Why didn't you mention this background from the beginning?" Williams asked. "In my current work, maintaining a low profile is often necessary," Chin explained. "I wanted to evaluate my skills against current standards without the assumptions that come with my military background." Morrison understood her reasoning, but he also recognized that the situation had fundamentally changed. Chin's true background was now known to the group, which would make it difficult for her to return to her previous cover identity. Given this new information, Morrison announced to the group, "I'm modifying today's exercise structure. Chin will serve as a demonstration instructor for the more advanced scenarios, showing proper technique before each candidate attempts the exercise." This solution served multiple purposes. It acknowledged Chin's superior skill level while providing valuable learning opportunities for the other candidates. It also gave Morrison a chance to see Chin's full capabilities without the constraints of maintaining her cover story. "Next scenario involves multiple moving targets with threat discrimination," Morrison explained. "Targets include armed combatants, civilians, and friendly forces. Engaging wrong targets results in immediate failure." The scenario was significantly more complex than standard military training. Multiple figures moved through a simulated village environment, some carrying weapons, others clearly civilians going about daily activities. The challenge was identifying legitimate threats and engaging them without harming innocents. "Chun, demonstrate proper technique for this scenario," Morrison instructed. Chin moved to the firing position with obvious familiarity. Her pre-engagement assessment was thorough but rapid, studying the entire target area rather than focusing on individual figures. When the scenario began, her decision-making process was immediately evident. Multiple figures appeared simultaneously across the target area. Chen's first engagement was a figure carrying an AK-47 rifle in an aggressive posture. Her shot was instant and precise, dropping the target before it could complete its movement pattern. A second armed figure appeared near a group of civilians. Chen held her fire momentarily, waiting for the target to separate from the non-combatants before engaging. Her patience was rewarded when the figure moved into clear shooting lanes, allowing for precise engagement without risk to nearby civilians. The scenario continued with increasing complexity as more figures appeared and moved through the target area. Chen's target selection was flawless, engaging only legitimate threats while avoiding any risk to non-combatant targets. Her shooting speed was extraordinary, but, more importantly, her judgment under pressure was exceptional. When the scenario concluded, Chen had engaged 7 valid targets with 7 perfect hits while avoiding engagement of 12 non-combatant figures that had appeared in the target area. Her threat discrimination had been perfect throughout the exercise. Morrison found himself genuinely impressed despite his high expectations. Chen's performance demonstrated not just exceptional marksmanship, but the kind of judgment and decision-making that could only come from extensive real-world experience in complex operational environments. Outstanding demonstration, Morrison announced. That's how threat discrimination should be handled under pressure. The other candidates attempted the same scenario with varying degrees of success. Most managed to avoid engaging non-combatants, but their target selection was slower and less decisive than Chen's demonstration. Several candidates missed valid targets due to hesitation or poor shot execution under pressure. As the morning progressed, Morrison found himself using Chen more as an instructor than an evaluation candidate. Her ability to demonstrate proper technique while explaining the decision-making process was invaluable for the other candidates' learning. During a break between exercises, Rodriguez approached Morrison privately. "Sir, what's Chen's story really? Delta Force operators don't just disappear into civilian jobs unless something significant happened." Morrison had been wondering the same thing. Chen's separation from active duty and transition to NOC work suggested circumstances beyond normal end-of-enlistment procedures. "I haven't gotten the full story yet," Morrison replied honestly. "But, based on her performance today, I'd say the military lost one hell of an operator." The afternoon stress fire exercises would provide even more revealing insights into Chen's background and capabilities. Morrison suspected that by the end of the day, Chen's true story would become impossible to conceal from the group. The afternoon stress fire exercises began under increasingly dark clouds that matched Morrison's growing curiosity about Chen's complete background. What he had learned so far explained her exceptional capabilities, but raised new questions about the circumstances surrounding her separation from Delta Force and transition to intelligence work. "This afternoon we're testing your performance under physical and mental stress," Morrison announced to the remaining candidates. Combat situations rarely allow for comfortable shooting positions or unlimited time for target engagement. You need to prove you can perform under adverse conditions. He gestured toward a series of obstacles and equipment stations arranged across the training area. Each candidate will complete a physical stress course, then immediately transition to precision shooting under time pressure. Your heart rate will be elevated, your breathing will be compromised, and your fine motor control will be degraded. That's when we discover who has truly internalized their shooting fundamentals. Morrison could see several candidates already looking uncomfortable. Physical stress combined with precision shooting requirements was a combination that challenged even experienced military personnel. The course includes low crawling under wire obstacles, sprinting between stations, climbing walls, and carrying heavy equipment, Morrison continued. You'll complete the entire circuit as quickly as possible, then engage multiple targets at various distances with limited ammunition and strict time constraints. Sergeant Williams raised his hand. "Sir, what's the time limit for the shooting portion?" 90 seconds to engage 12 targets at distances from 100 to 600 meters, Morrison replied. "You'll have exactly 12 rounds of ammunition, so every shot must count." Chin stood quietly among the group, showing no signs of concern about the upcoming challenge. Morrison suspected that stress fire scenarios had been routine during her Delta Force service, but he was curious to see how she would handle the combination of physical exertion and precision shooting after 3 years away from military training. "Rodriguez, you're up first," Morrison called. Rodriguez approached the stress course with determination, clearly drawing on his combat experience to prepare mentally for the challenge. The physical portion required intense effort, including crawling through mud under low wire obstacles, sprinting up steep inclines, and climbing over walls while carrying a 40-pound rucksack. When Rodriguez completed the physical course and transitioned to the shooting station, his breathing was labored and his hands showed visible tremor from muscular fatigue. Morrison started the 90-second timer as Rodriguez attempted to settle into a stable shooting position. The first few targets were at relatively close range, allowing Rodriguez to score hits despite his compromised physical condition. As the distances increased, the effects of stress became more pronounced. His shooting rhythm was rushed, and his position stability suffered from the combination of fatigue and time pressure. Rodriguez managed 8 hits out of 12 shots, a respectable performance considering the challenging conditions. Several other candidates followed with similar results, most scoring between 6 and 10 hits as they struggled with the demands of precision shooting while physically compromised. When Chin's turn arrived, Morrison watched her approach the stress course with particular interest. Her pre-exercise routine was minimal but focused, emphasizing controlled breathing and mental preparation rather than physical warm-up activities. Chin attacked the physical obstacles with efficiency rather than pure aggression. Her movements were economical and purposeful, conserving energy while maintaining speed through the course. Morrison noticed that her technique on each obstacle was textbook perfect, suggesting extensive training in tactical movement under demanding conditions. When Chun completed the physical portion and moved to the shooting station, Morrison was surprised to see that her breathing had already begun to normalize. Her recovery time from intense physical exertion was significantly faster than the other candidates, indicating superior physical conditioning and stress management training. As Morrison started the 90-second timer, Chin immediately settled into a stable shooting position. Despite having just completed an exhausting physical course, her shooting stance was rock solid, and her rifle held steady without visible tremor. Her first shot engaged a target at 100 meters with perfect precision. The second and third shots followed in rapid succession, each finding its mark despite the time pressure and physical stress. Morrison found himself timing Chin's shooting rhythm and realizing she was maintaining the same consistent pace she had demonstrated throughout the previous day's exercises. Target after target fell to Chin's precise shooting, her performance showing no degradation despite the challenging conditions. Her breathing had completely normalized, and her position stability remained constant throughout the exercise. With 30 seconds remaining on the timer, Chin engaged the final 3 targets at 500 and 600 meters. These shots required more time for precise aiming, but her execution remained flawless. The last shot rang steel with 15 seconds still remaining on the timer. 12 shots fired, 12 targets hit, all under severe time pressure following intense physical exertion. Morrison lowered his stopwatch and stared at Chun in amazement. He had conducted stress fire exercises for hundreds of candidates over the years, and he had never seen anyone maintain that level of precision under such demanding conditions. "Perfect score," Morrison announced to the group. 12 for 12 under stress conditions. Rodriguez shook his head in disbelief. "Ma'am, how did you manage that? I mean, after that physical course, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the rifle steady." Chun considered the question carefully before answering. "Training and experience, Sergeant. In my previous work, performing under stress was a basic requirement, not an exceptional circumstance." Her answer was diplomatically phrased, but clearly indicated that stress fire scenarios had been routine during her Delta Force service. Morrison realized that what challenged conventional military personnel was probably considered basic qualification standards for special operations units. Williams approached Chun with obvious respect. "Ma'am, what kind of training prepares someone for that level of performance?" Repetition under increasingly difficult conditions, Chen replied. You start with basic shooting skills and gradually add complexity, stress, and pressure until performing under adverse conditions becomes automatic. Morrison could see the other candidates absorbing Chen's explanation and recognizing the vast difference between conventional military training and special operations preparation. What they had struggled with was likely basic qualification material for someone with Chen's background. Next exercise involves team coordination scenarios, Morrison announced. You'll work with a spotter to engage targets beyond individual capability ranges. Communication, coordination, and trust become as important as individual shooting skills. Morrison had deliberately saved this exercise for last because it would reveal the most about Chen's actual operational experience. Working effectively with a spotter required skills that could only be developed through extensive field training and real-world application. Chen, since you've been demonstrating proper technique throughout the day, I'd like you to work with me as your spotter for the first scenario, Morrison said. Then, you can coach the other candidates on effective spotter-shooter coordination. Chen nodded her agreement, and Morrison found himself genuinely excited about the opportunity to work with someone of her caliber. He had spotted for numerous snipers over the years, but rarely for anyone with Delta Force credentials. The scenario involved targets at extended ranges from 800 to 1,200 meters, distances where spotter assistance became critical for successful engagement. Environmental conditions were challenging, with variable wind conditions and changing light angles that complicated range estimation and ballistic calculations. As Chun prepared her shooting position, Morrison established his spotting position adjacent to her location. The coordination between sniper and spotter was immediately apparent. They settled into roles with the smooth efficiency of a team that had worked together for years. Target, 875 meters, moving left to right at approximately 4 kilometers per hour, Morrison called through his spotting scope. Confirmed, Chin replied. Reading wind as 8 knots from 2 o'clock, gusting to 12. Morrison checked his own wind assessment and found it matched Chin's reading exactly. Concur on wind. Target is adult male, dark clothing, carrying what appears to be a rifle. Target acquired. Firing solution calculated. Morrison watched through his spotting scope as Chin settled into her final shooting position. Her breathing pattern slowed to the controlled rhythm he recognized from his own combat deployments. Send it when ready. The shot broke cleanly, and Morrison tracked the bullet impact through his spotting scope. Hit, center mass. Target down. Their coordination continued through multiple scenarios, each engagement flowing smoothly from target identification through shot execution and impact assessment. Morrison found himself genuinely impressed by Chin's ability to process complex information quickly and make accurate shooting decisions under pressure. What impressed him most was her communication style. Chin provided just enough information to coordinate effectively without unnecessary chatter or confusion. Her reports were precise, timely, and completely professional. After completing their demonstration, Morrison turned to address the other candidates. That's how effective spotter-shooter teams operate. Notice the clear communication, shared situational awareness, and trust between team members. As the other candidates attempted similar scenarios with varying degrees of success, Morrison found himself reflecting on Chin's complete skill set. She wasn't just an exceptional marksman. She was a complete tactical professional with capabilities across the entire spectrum of precision shooting applications. During the final break of the day, Morrison approached Chin privately once more. I have to ask, what really happened with your separation from Delta? Operators of your caliber don't typically leave special operations unless circumstances force the decision. Chin was quiet for several moments, clearly debating how much information to share. There was an incident during my final deployment. A mission went wrong, people died who shouldn't have, and I was held responsible for decisions made under impossible circumstances. Morrison understood immediately. The special operations community was small, and stories about missions gone wrong typically spread quickly through official and unofficial channels. Someone with Chin's capabilities didn't just disappear unless political or legal pressures made continued service impossible. Were the charges justified? That depends on your perspective, Chin replied. I made decisions based on information available at the time. When additional facts came to light later, those decisions looked questionable to people who weren't there. Morrison had seen similar situations before. Combat operations were frequently evaluated by people with perfect information and unlimited time to analyze decisions that had been made under extreme pressure with incomplete intelligence. And now you're working in OC? It provides opportunities to use my skills while maintaining some distance from official military structures, Chin explained. Morrison nodded, understanding her position. Intelligence agencies often recruited former special operations personnel whose military careers had ended under controversial circumstances, but whose capabilities remained valuable for specialized assignments. What about the future? Morrison asked. Are you interested in the contract opportunities we discussed? Chin considered the question carefully. After today's exercises, I suspect my current assignment may be compromised anyway. People will ask questions about my performance that my cover story can't answer. Morrison realized she was right. Word about Chin's exceptional capabilities would spread quickly through the special operations community, making it difficult for her to maintain her current low-profile assignment. I might have a solution, Morrison said. There's a contractor I work with occasionally who specializes in very discreet, very well-compensated assignments. The kind of work where exceptional capabilities are an asset rather than a liability. Chin's interest was clearly piqued. What kind of work? High-value target elimination, executive protection, maritime interdiction operations. Clients include government agencies, private corporations, and international organizations that need problems solved quietly and efficiently. Morrison could see Chin weighing the possibilities. Contract work offered independence and financial rewards, but also carried risks that government service didn't typically involve. Think about it overnight, Morrison suggested. Tomorrow's final exercise will essentially be your audition if you decide you're interested. As the candidates prepared to return to their quarters, Morrison found himself genuinely excited about tomorrow's final evaluation. Chun had already demonstrated capabilities beyond anything he had expected, but the final exercise would reveal whether she was truly ready for the most demanding assignments available in the contractor community.